The sensor arrays lit up first. Red warnings flooded every military installation across the planet in the same instant. Something massive had just entered the solar system, and it was not from Earth. Ralvin studied the blue planet through the observation window of his command ship. 300 vessels floated behind him in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the distant sunlight. This was his 848th conquest. He knew exactly how it would unfold. The intelligence data scrolled across his viewing screen. The humans possessed primitive atomic weapons and fragmented governments. They had barely touched their own moon. Their longest space journey had reached only to their neighboring planets. By Drathic standards, they were children playing with fire. "Send the surrender demand," Ralvin ordered. His communications officer nodded and transmitted the message in 127 different human languages. The Drathic Imperium had perfected this process over centuries. On Earth, the message arrived simultaneously at government buildings, military bases, and broadcasting stations. People stopped in the streets as the alien voice echoed from every speaker and screen. The demand was simple: surrender within 6 hours or face annihilation. Inside a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Ann Walsh read the translated message for the third time. Around her, representatives from every major nation gathered via secure video links. The room buzzed with dozens of languages, all saying the same thing in different words. They were not ready for this. "How long until they reach us?" someone asked. "At their current speed, they will be in Earth orbit in 18 hours, a technician replied. Walsh leaned back in her chair. 18 hours. The Drathic expected humanity to spend 6 of those hours debating surrender. They were wrong about that too. "Activate Protocol Midnight," she said quietly. The room fell silent. Protocol Midnight was theoretical. It had been designed by scientists who half believed they were wasting their time. The idea was simple but insane. If an alien force ever invaded, humanity would not try to fight them in space. Humanity would turn Earth itself into a weapon. Ralvin watched his fleet advance past Mars. The red planet held nothing of interest. His sensors detected the small human stations orbiting Earth, fragile metal structures that posed no threat. He noticed something odd, though. The humans were not mobilizing their military forces. Instead, they seemed to be evacuating their cities. "They accept defeat already," his second officer observed. Ralvin nodded. "Begin preparing bombardment coordinates. We will eliminate their military infrastructure first, then demand complete submission." But deep in silos across Earth, old weapons were being moved. Nuclear missiles designed for wars between humans were being repositioned. Scientists worked frantically, converting weapons of mass destruction into components of something never tested outside computer simulations. Dr. Richard Hayes had spent 20 years studying atmospheric physics. Now he stood in a control room, watching as calculations he had published in obscure journals became reality. The plan was elegant in its brutality. Detonate nuclear devices in a precise pattern across the upper atmosphere, not to destroy, but to ionize. Turn the entire sky into an electromagnetic storm. "This will knock out our own power grids," someone warned. "Better than being conquered," Hayes replied. The 6-hour deadline expired. Ralvin had received no response from Earth except silence. He gave the order to advance into low orbit. His shields could withstand anything the humans might throw at them. The Drathic had conquered worlds far more advanced than this one. 300 warships descended toward Earth like falling stars. Their weapons systems locked onto targets, military bases, government buildings, power plants. The bombardment would take minutes. The occupation would take days. Then the sky caught fire. Simultaneous detonations erupted in the thermosphere, 50 miles above Earth's surface. The explosions were not aimed at the fleet. They were aimed at the air itself. Massive electrical charges rippled through the atmosphere, creating cascading electromagnetic pulses that washed over everything in orbit. Ralvin's shields flickered. Warning lights exploded across his command console. "What is happening?" he demanded. "The entire planet is generating electromagnetic interference," his systems officer reported, confusion clear in his voice. "They are disrupting their own communications and power systems just to attack us." Before Ralvin could respond, the real assault began. Modified missiles launched from hidden positions across Earth's surface. These were not nuclear weapons. They were kinetic penetrators, designed to punch through weakened shields. Rail guns fired from mountain installations that had not existed on any Drathic intelligence report. Chemical rockets carrying fragmentation warheads rose from the oceans. The Drathic shields, already struggling against the electromagnetic storm, began to fail. The first warship exploded in a brilliant flash, then another, then 5 more. "Retreat to higher orbit," Ralvin commanded, his confidence evaporating. Dropships that had already launched toward Earth's surface found themselves without cover. Ground-based weapons tore them apart. The few that survived the gauntlet crashed in remote areas, their guidance systems fried by the electromagnetic interference. Walsh watched the tactical display as enemy ships retreated. Earth's orbital space was filled with debris, 12 Drathic vessels destroyed, dozens more damaged. The cost was enormous. Power grids across the planet had collapsed. Satellites tumbled uselessly. Millions sat in darkness. But they were still free. A communication channel opened. Walsh authorized the response transmission. "You came to our home," she said, knowing the Drathic would hear her words. "We do not need shields or superior technology. We just needed you to get close enough to hurt. Leave now or learn what desperation really means." Ralvin received the message in his command chair. Around him, damage reports continued to flood in. He had never seen anything like this. The humans had sacrificed their own infrastructure, crippled their own civilization, just to wound an enemy they could not defeat in conventional combat. For the first time in 847 conquests, Ralvin felt something unfamiliar: uncertainty. These primitive beings had just done something no advanced civilization would consider. They had proven they would rather destroy themselves than submit. The war had just begun, and already nothing was going according to plan. 3 days passed in tense silence. The Drathic fleet orbited beyond the reach of Earth's weapons, regrouping and reassessing. Ralvin studied reports from the failed invasion attempt, searching for patterns he could exploit. His superiors at the Imperium had sent clear instructions: capture Earth intact. The species that could sacrifice its own technology to wound a superior enemy was worth studying. Ralvin disagreed. He thought they should glass the planet from orbit and be done with it, but orders were orders. On Earth, the recovery had begun. Military engineers worked around the clock to restore power using hardened systems designed to survive electromagnetic pulses. Civilian populations remained in underground shelters, converted subway tunnels, and reinforced basements. The initial celebration of survival had given way to grim determination. Everyone knew the aliens would return. General Walsh coordinated with commanders across the globe. The electromagnetic attack had worked once. It would not work again. The Drathic would adapt their shields, change their approach. Humanity needed new strategies. "They will try a ground invasion next," predicted Colonel Torres from his command post in Buenos Aires. "Orbital bombardment failed. They will want to take territory the old-fashioned way." Walsh agreed. "Let them come. We know this planet better than they ever will." Ralvin finalized his new strategy. 50,000 Drathic soldiers would land in remote locations, far from major human population centers. They would establish secure beachheads, then advance on foot toward strategic targets. The humans could not use their electromagnetic weapons without warning if Drathic forces were dispersed across the surface. The landing sites were chosen carefully. The frozen wastes of Siberia, the endless sand of the Sahara Desert, the dense jungle of the Amazon basin, the barren interior of Australia, places where human presence was minimal and resistance would be scattered. The dropships launched in waves, spreading across Earth's surface like a plague. This time they descended slowly, shields at maximum, ready for surface-to-air missiles. But the missiles never came. The humans seemed content to let them land. In Siberia, the first Drathic soldiers emerged from their transport pods into snow that reached their knees. The temperature registered at -40 degrees. Their environmental suits compensated automatically, heating their bodies against the cold. "Spread out and advance toward the nearest human settlement," commanded squad leader Tarn. His troops moved in formation, weapons ready, sensors scanning for threats. The threats came from the environment itself. 3 hours into their march, the heating systems in their suits began to fail. The extreme cold exceeded their equipment specifications. Drathic technology was designed for temperate worlds. Their empire had never conquered a planet with such harsh extremes. Tarn tried to radio for extraction, but something was interfering with communications. Not jamming, just the natural interference of the ionosphere at these latitudes, amplified by the lingering effects of the electromagnetic attack days earlier. Then the humans attacked, not from the front, but from positions dug into the snow itself. Soldiers who had trained in these conditions their entire lives, wearing gear designed for Arctic warfare, emerged and disappeared like ghosts. Tarn's squad fell one by one, picked off by enemies they could barely see. In the Sahara, a different nightmare unfolded. The Drathic column advanced across the sand, confident in their numbers and firepower. The sandstorm hit without warning, a wall of dust and wind that blotted out the sun. Their sensors, designed to penetrate the vacuum of space, became useless in the churning sand. Hidden beneath the dunes, human forces waited. They had fought wars in this desert for thousands of years. They knew every trick the sand could play. As the Drathic stumbled forward, blind and disoriented, explosives buried in the sand detonated in sequence. The blast sent aliens tumbling, their armor cracked by the percussion waves. The Amazon offered a third lesson in terrestrial warfare. The jungle swallowed the Drathic invasion force whole. Every tree could hide an enemy. Every shadow might conceal a trap. The humans used the environment like a weapon, leading aliens into swamps where their heavy armor became a liability, stringing tripwires that triggered ancient but effective explosives, poisoning water sources the Drathic scanned as safe to drink. One Drathic warrior, separated from his unit, stumbled upon a human soldier crouched behind a fallen log. They stared at each other for a moment. The human was smaller, weaker, armed with a chemical projectile weapon that seemed laughably primitive. But the human knew this jungle, knew which plants were poisonous, knew where the ground was solid and where it would give way to hidden sinkholes. The Drathic warrior had superior armor, better weapons, and advanced training. It did not matter. The human fired once, hitting a weak point in the armor's joint. As the warrior fell, his last thought was confusion. How did the primitive know exactly where to aim? In Australia, the pattern repeated. The Drathic had expected the outback to be empty, defenseless. Instead, they found themselves walking into carefully prepared killing zones, mines buried beneath red sand, snipers positioned on distant ridges, ambushes at every water source. Ralvin watched the casualty reports climb. In 3 days of ground operations, he had lost 12,000 soldiers. The humans were sustaining losses too, but at a ratio that made his tactical computer flag warnings. For every human killed, 4 Drathic died. "This is unacceptable," he told his senior officers. "We have superior technology, superior training. How are we losing to primitives?" His intelligence officer provided an answer. "Because we are fighting them on their world, Commander. Every climate, every terrain, every environmental factor works against us. They have spent their entire evolutionary history adapting to this planet. We are visitors, and the planet itself rejects us. Ralvin refused to accept this. He had conquered 40 worlds personally. He would not be defeated by a species that had barely achieved space flight. "Deploy the biological weapons," he ordered. His officers exchanged glances. Biological weapons were forbidden under Imperium law except in extreme circumstances. Using them would brand Ralvin as ruthless, possibly criminal. But it would also win the war. "If they want to use their planet as a weapon," Ralvin said coldly, "then we will teach them that biology can be weaponized too." The biological agent dispersed over major cities like invisible rain. Drathic aerial drones released the pathogen from high altitude, letting air currents carry it across population centers. The weapon had been designed specifically to target human physiology, attacking the respiratory system with brutal efficiency. Ralvin expected millions of casualties within days. The Imperium's Biological Warfare Division had never failed to break a population's will to resist. Fear of disease was universal, transcending species and culture. He was wrong again. Dr. Sarah Lin stood in a makeshift laboratory in Shanghai, studying samples of the alien pathogen under electron microscopes. Around her, virologists from across the globe collaborated through restored communication networks. The disease was sophisticated, targeting human cells with precision. But humans had been fighting diseases for their entire existence. Plagues, pandemics, and epidemics were woven into the fabric of human history. Every generation had faced some new microscopic threat. Humanity had learned to fight back. "It mimics viral structures we have seen before," Lin reported to her colleagues in Atlanta, Mumbai, and London. "The alien designers based it on our own biology, assuming that would make it unstoppable. They were half right." Within 48 hours, the global medical community had identified the pathogen's weaknesses. It spread quickly but burned out fast. It targeted specific proteins in human lungs, but those proteins varied slightly across different populations. What killed efficiently in one genetic group was less effective in another. Humanity's diversity, so often a source of division, became a shield. Modified vaccines rolled out from laboratories that had been built to handle outbreaks. Treatments using existing antiviral medications showed promise. The death toll was real and tragic, numbering in the hundreds of thousands. But it was not the civilization-ending plague Ralvin had anticipated. General Walsh received the medical reports with grim satisfaction. The biological attack had failed to break humanity. If anything, it had hardened resolve. The Drathic had crossed a line, and now there would be consequences. "Release Protocol Zero," she ordered. Protocol Zero was the designation for total war. Every restriction, every rule of engagement, every concern about collateral damage was suspended. If the Drathic would use biological weapons, humanity would respond with everything in its arsenal. The nuclear weapons came first, not aimed at the Drathic fleet in orbit, but at their ground positions. Tactical warheads detonated over Drathic encampments in Siberia, the Sahara, and the Australian outback. The aliens had superior shields on their ships, but their ground forces relied on personal armor that could not withstand nuclear fire. Ralvin watched in horror as entire battalions vanished in atomic light. The humans were irradiating their own planet, rendering huge sections of territory uninhabitable for decades, just to eliminate the invasion force. "They have gone insane," his second officer whispered. Perhaps they had. Or perhaps they had simply decided that a poisoned Earth under human control was preferable to a pristine Earth under alien occupation. In orbit, a new threat emerged. Human spacecraft, hastily converted from commercial vessels, began ramming attacks against the Drathic fleet. cargo haulers packed with explosives. Passenger shuttles turned into kinetic missiles. Even the International Space Station, humanity's proudest orbital achievement, was deliberately deorbited to crash into a Drathic carrier. One pilot broadcast her final message as she accelerated toward an enemy warship. Her name was Rebecca Stone, and she had been a freight pilot for 15 years. "Tell my daughter I fought for her future," she said calmly. Then her ship, loaded with stolen mining explosives, struck the Drathic vessel's engine section. The explosion tore through 3 decks. The warship listed, its propulsion system destroyed. Debris scattered across orbital space, some pieces burning up in the atmosphere, others drifting away into the void. Ralvin finally understood. These humans did not fear death. They feared subjugation. Given the choice between dying free or living as slaves, they chose death every single time. On Earth's surface, the ground war intensified. Civilian populations that had been sheltering underground emerged as combatants. Old weapons, some dating back 100 years, were distributed from stockpiles. If a rifle could fire, it was used. If a knife could cut, it was given to someone willing to fight. In occupied zones, resistance networks activated. Factory workers sabotaged Drathic equipment. Farmers poisoned food supplies destined for alien forces. Teachers organized intelligence networks. The Drathic had expected to fight armies. Instead, they faced an entire species in arms. One Drathic soldier, wounded and isolated in the ruins of a human city, was found by a young woman. She carried a pistol and a medical kit. For a moment, neither moved. Then she raised the pistol and fired 3 times. As the soldier died, he realized she was crying. She did not want to kill, but she wanted freedom more than peace. The casualties mounted on both sides. Tens of millions of humans dead. Hundreds of thousands of Drathic soldiers eliminated. Cities lay in ruins. Forests burned. Oceans were contaminated with debris from orbital battles. And still humanity fought. Ralvin made his final decision. He requested deployment of the planet Cracker, a weapon so terrible that its use required approval from the highest levels of the Imperium. The device could fracture a planet's tectonic plates, triggering earthquakes and volcanic eruptions that would render the world uninhabitable. If the Drathic could not have Earth, then no one would. The approval came through within hours. The Imperium had lost patience with the conquest. Too many resources expended. Too many casualties. The war needed to end, one way or another. "Planet Cracker will arrive in 48 hours, Ralvin announced to his remaining fleet. "Prepare to retreat to safe distance after deployment." The message was intercepted by human intelligence within minutes. In bunkers and command centers across the scarred planet, people received the news. The aliens were going to destroy Earth itself. General Walsh convened an emergency council. Military leaders, scientists, and civilian representatives joined the call. Faces haggard with exhaustion stared from screens. "We have 48 hours, Walsh said quietly. "Ideas?" A young officer spoke up. His name was Lieutenant Gary Brooks, and he had been studying captured Drathic technology. "The planet Cracker has to be deployed from their flagship. If we destroy the flagship, the weapon becomes useless." "We cannot reach the flagship," someone objected. "It is protected by the entire fleet." Brooks nodded. "Not from the outside, but what if we hit it from the inside?" The plan was suicide, and everyone knew it. A boarding party would infiltrate the Drathic flagship, sabotage it from within, and prevent the planet Cracker deployment. No one expected to survive. Volunteers came forward anyway. Soldiers from a dozen nations. Engineers who understood alien technology from studying captured equipment. Even a few civilians with specialized skills that might prove useful. 30 people total, each one writing final letters to loved ones they would never see again. The spacecraft chosen for the mission was a prototype stealth vessel, designed before the invasion for reconnaissance missions. It had never been tested in combat. Now it would carry humanity's last desperate gamble into the heart of the enemy fleet. Lieutenant Brooks led the technical team. His counterpart, Major Helen Park, commanded the military personnel. They had 40 hours to plan, equip, and launch. Every minute counted. The flagship's shields will be focused outward, Brooks explained during the briefing. They expect attacks from Earth, not from orbital debris. We disguise our approach as wreckage from destroyed ships. It was a thin hope. The Drathic sensors were sophisticated, but the electromagnetic interference still lingering in Earth's orbit might give them just enough cover. The team loaded equipment that seemed absurd for a space mission. Plasma cutters to breach alien hulls, magnetic boots for zero-gravity movement, chemical explosives because they worked in vacuum, and conventional firearms because sometimes the old ways were the best ways. As the boarding craft prepared to launch, General Walsh spoke to the volunteers via video link. She searched for words that might comfort them, might honor their sacrifice. In the end, she simply said thank you. It seemed inadequate, but it was all she had. The craft launched during a coordinated assault. Every remaining weapon on Earth fired at the Drathic fleet. Missiles, rail gun rounds, and improvised kinetic projectiles filled the space between the planet and its invaders. The barrage was not meant to destroy. It was meant to distract. While Drathic point defense systems tracked and eliminated the obvious threats, the boarding craft drifted through the debris field. Its hull had been scorched and dented to resemble wreckage. Its power signature was minimal. To Drathic sensors, it looked like just another piece of destroyed human technology. The craft approached the flagship from below, where the massive vessel's sensor coverage was weakest. Brooks monitored their progress on a handheld display. 1 kilometer, 500 meters, 100. They attached to the flagship's hull using magnetic clamps. The plasma cutters began their work immediately, slicing through alien metal with blue-white fire. The hull breached after 12 minutes of continuous cutting. Atmosphere vented briefly before emergency systems sealed the gap. The boarding party slipped inside. The interior of the Drathic flagship was a maze of corridors designed for beings slightly larger than humans. Emergency lights cast everything in a red glow. The team split into 2 groups as planned. Park would lead the assault on the bridge. Brooks would take the engineering team to the reactor core. They moved through the ship like shadows. Drathic crew members, surprised to find enemies already aboard, died before they could raise alarms. The humans fought with brutal efficiency, knowing every second mattered. Park's team reached a major intersection and ran straight into a Drathic security patrol. The firefight was brief and vicious. Plasma bolts scorched the walls. Human bullets found alien flesh. When the smoke cleared, 3 of Park's soldiers lay dead, but the way to the bridge was open. Meanwhile, Brooks navigated the engineering section using schematics downloaded from captured Drathic computers. The reactor core was massive, a sphere of contained energy that powered the entire flagship. Around it, alien engineers worked at their stations, unaware of the threat creeping through access tunnels above them. Brooks and his team dropped from the ceiling, weapons ready. The Drathic engineers were not soldiers. Most surrendered immediately. One reached for an alarm. He died reaching. "Secure the room," Brooks ordered. His engineers began analyzing the reactor systems, searching for a way to overload it. The Drathic power systems used principles that seemed alien at first, but energy was energy. Make it unstable enough and it would explode. On the bridge, Park's team fought through the final defensive line. The Drathic bridge crew grabbed weapons, but they were command personnel, not warriors. Park herself shot the communications officer as he tried to send a distress signal. Ralvin stood from his command chair, facing the human intruders. He held no weapon. His species believed commanders should lead through strategy, not personal combat. Now he realized that might have been a mistake. "You cannot win," he said in halting human speech. "Even if you destroy this ship, the Imperium will send more." Park lowered her weapon slightly. "Maybe they will, but you will not be there to see it." "Why do you resist?" Ralvin asked. The question seemed genuine. "We offer you a place in the Imperium, technology, resources, an end to your primitive conflicts." "We offer ourselves freedom," Park replied. "That is enough." In the engineering section, Brooks had made his decision. They could not disable the reactor safely. They could not capture the ship, but they could turn it into a bomb that would cripple the Drathic fleet. "How long do we have?" one of his engineers asked. 20 minutes until overload," Brooks said. "No way to reverse it once we start." The engineer nodded. They had all known this was a one-way mission. Brooks activated the overload sequence. Deep within the reactor core, containment fields began to fail in a carefully orchestrated cascade. The explosion would be spectacular. On the bridge, Park received the message from Brooks. The reactor was set. Time to evacuate was already past. They were committed now. She looked at Ralvin. "You asked why we resist. It is because this is our world, our home. You came here thinking we were weak. You learned differently." Ralvin said nothing. What could he say? He had been wrong about everything. Park opened a communication channel to Earth. Her voice reached command centers across the planet. "General Walsh, the mission is complete. The flagship will be destroyed. The planet Cracker will not be deployed." Walsh heard the finality in Park's voice. "Understood, Major. Thank you for your service." There was so much more to say, but no time left to say it. The reactor overload reached critical mass. The flagship's hull began to glow from internal heat. Drathic crew members realized what was happening and scrambled for escape pods. They were too late. The explosion tore through the ship, converting matter into energy in a blinding flash that outshone the sun for 3 full seconds. The explosion lit up Earth's night sky like a second sun. People emerged from shelters to witness the massive fireball expanding in orbit. The Drathic flagship had become a temporary star, its death throes visible to the naked eye from the surface. The shockwave from the explosion caught nearby Drathic vessels. Those closest to the flagship simply disintegrated, their hulls crushed by the pressure wave. Others tumbled away with critical damage, atmosphere venting from ruptured seams, engines offline, life support failing. In the span of 5 seconds, the Drathic fleet lost 70% of its remaining strength. Aboard the surviving vessels, chaos erupted. Command structures collapsed as officers died or found themselves commanding ships with no way to communicate with the rest of the fleet. Some captains ordered immediate retreat. Others, stunned by the sudden reversal, did nothing. The remaining Drathic ground forces received garbled messages from orbit. Retreat. Evacuation impossible. They were being abandoned. In Siberia, a Drathic squad leader named Vorn realized he would never leave Earth. His transport was gone. The fleet was retreating. He and his soldiers were stranded on a hostile world with no hope of rescue. Around him, his troops looked for guidance. Some suggested fighting to the end. Others spoke of surrender. Vorn made the only choice that seemed rational. He removed his helmet, letting the freezing air hit his face. "We find shelter," he said. "We survive. Maybe someday they come back for us." It was a thin hope, but hope nonetheless. Human forces, monitoring the battlefield from countless positions, watched the Drathic fleet scatter. Some ships jumped to faster-than-light speed, disappearing in flashes of bent space. Others limped away on damaged engines, trailing debris and frozen atmosphere. General Walsh stood in her command center, surrounded by screens showing the retreat from multiple angles. She had expected to die today. Earth had expected to die. Instead, they had won. The cost had been unimaginable. Entire cities destroyed. Hundreds of millions dead from the fighting, the biological weapons, the nuclear exchanges. The planet's infrastructure was in ruins. The electromagnetic attacks had damaged systems that would take years to repair fully. But they had won. "Get me a casualty count," Walsh ordered, though she dreaded the answer. The numbers came in slowly. 340 million human deaths, countless more injured, refugee populations in the billions, economic damage that could not be calculated. On the Drathic side, the losses were equally staggering. 260 warships destroyed or disabled, 40,000 ground troops dead or captured, the flagship and its command staff eliminated entirely. In the remains of Sydney, a Drathic soldier emerged from rubble with his hands raised. Australian forces surrounded him, weapons ready. The alien said nothing. He simply waited. Similar scenes played out across the globe. Stranded Drathic forces surrendering to humans they had been trying to conquer hours earlier. Some were executed on sight by populations seeking revenge. Others were taken prisoner, held in makeshift camps while authorities decided what to do with them. One group of Drathic soldiers in the Amazon rainforest chose not to surrender. They fought until their ammunition ran out, then fought hand to hand until human forces overwhelmed them. The last warrior died with a human knife in his chest, still trying to reach his weapon. The Imperium received reports of the disaster within hours. The Governing Council convened in emergency session. Never in the Imperium's 1,000-year history had a conquest failed so completely. Never had a primitive species inflicted such devastating losses. Debate raged among the council members. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others argued for caution. A few suggested abandoning Earth entirely and pretending the invasion had never happened. The final decision came from the Imperium's oldest member, a being who had witnessed 500 conquests. "Quarantine Earth," it declared. "Mark it as forbidden territory. No species shall approach human space without permission from this council." The vote was unanimous. Earth would be left alone, not out of respect but out of fear. Word of the quarantine spread through the Imperium's territories within days. The story of the invasion grew with each retelling. Earth, the death world. Humanity, the species that would destroy itself rather than surrender. The planet that had broken the Drathic fleet. Some species in the Imperium found the stories hard to believe. Others took them as warnings. A few, in secret communications, expressed admiration for humanity's stubborn refusal to accept defeat. On Earth, the recovery began in earnest. Salvage teams stripped abandoned Drathic equipment for useful technology. Scientists studied captured weapons, shield generators, and faster-than-light drives. Engineers began the long process of rebuilding destroyed cities using both human and alien technology. The war had unified humanity in ways no amount of diplomacy ever could. National borders still existed, but they seemed less important now. Everyone had fought the same enemy. Everyone had bled for the same cause. General Walsh addressed a global audience from the rebuilt United Nations building in Geneva. Behind her, flags from every nation on Earth hung in silent witness. "We have survived," she said simply. "The cost was terrible. The losses will echo through generations, but we are still here. We are still free." She paused, looking directly into the camera. The aliens came expecting an easy conquest. They found a species willing to sacrifice everything for freedom. Let that be a message to anyone else watching. Earth is our home. We will defend it with our last breath. In laboratories across the planet, human scientists completed reverse engineering the Drathic faster-than-light drive. The first test flight was scheduled for 3 months from now. Humanity had been confined to its solar system for its entire existence. Not anymore. The stars beckoned, and now finally humanity could answer. In an Imperium prison facility, Ralvin sat in a cell designed for disgraced commanders. He had survived the flagship's destruction by pure chance, thrown clear in an escape pod before the reactor detonated. Now he faced interrogation and likely execution. An Imperium investigator entered his cell. "Tell me about Earth," it commanded. Ralvin looked up. "What do you want to know?" "Why did you fail?" Ralvin laughed bitterly. "Because we thought technology was enough. We thought superior weapons meant guaranteed victory. We forgot that the most dangerous weapon is the refusal to surrender." The investigator made notes. Would humanity attack the Imperium? "No," Ralvin said with certainty. "They only wanted to be left alone. We should have listened." 1 year after the invasion, the Earth barely resembled the world the Drathic had first targeted. Cities rebuilt using hybrid technology rose from the ruins. Power grids hummed with energy from captured alien generators. Medical facilities treated the last of the wounded using both human and Drathic medical knowledge. The dead numbered in the hundreds of millions, their names carved into memorial walls that stretched for miles. Every nation had lost citizens. Every family had lost someone. The grief was universal and permanent. But so was the determination to ensure their sacrifice meant something. Dr. Sarah Lynn walked through the newly constructed International Space Research Facility in low Earth orbit. Around her, scientists from across the globe worked on projects that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. Faster-than-light engines, defensive shield systems, weapons that could challenge any aggressor. "We are not preparing for war," she told a visiting journalist. "We are preparing to ensure we never fight unprepared again." The first human interstellar vessel launched on a cold morning in December. The ship had no name yet. Some called it Explorer, others called it Guardian. The crew of 30 represented every continent, every major language group, every significant culture on Earth. Their mission was threefold: map the nearby star systems, establish early warning stations, and deliver a message to any alien civilization they encountered. Commander David Price stood on the bridge as his ship prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. Behind him, Earth filled the viewscreen, blue and white and brown, scarred but surviving. "All stations report ready," his navigator announced. "Engage drive," Price ordered. Reality bent. Space folded. The ship vanished from Earth's orbit and reappeared 20 light-years away in the span of a heartbeat. Humanity had just taken its first step beyond its home system. On Earth, General Walsh retired from active military service. She had aged 10 years in the span of one, her hair gone completely gray, her face lined with stress and grief. She moved to a small farm in Ireland, seeking peace after a year of constant war. But peace was relative. She still received daily briefings, still consulted on defense strategies, still woke from nightmares where the planet cracker detonated and Earth died screaming. A young reporter found her one afternoon tending to sheep in a green field. "General Walsh, people call you the savior of Earth. How does that feel?" Walsh looked at the reporter with tired eyes. "I am not a savior. I am a soldier who did her job. The real heroes are the ones who did not come home." Across the galaxy, the story of Earth spread. The Imperium had tried to suppress information about the failed conquest, but rumors leaked anyway. Soon every species with access to interstellar communication knew the tale. Earth, the death world. Humanity, the species too stubborn to die. Some alien civilizations reacted with fear. They reinforced their borders, prepared defenses against potential human aggression. Others reacted with curiosity. What kind of beings would sacrifice their own world rather than submit? A few very quietly began sending signals toward Earth. Not invasion fleets, not threats, simply greetings. "Hello, we mean no harm, can we talk?" Humanity listened to these signals carefully. The linguists who had learned Drathic now applied their skills to decoding new alien languages. Diplomats drafted responses that balanced caution with openness. The message humanity sent back was simple. We welcome peaceful contact. We will defend ourselves against aggression. Choose wisely which you offer. In the depths of space, Commander Price's ship encountered its first alien vessel. Not Drathic, but something else. A small scout ship from a species called the Tauren, peaceful traders who had watched the Earth-Drathic War from a safe distance. The Tauren captain hailed the human ship. "We come in peace. We wish to speak." Price authorized the communication channel. "This is Commander David Price of Earth. We receive you." The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours. The Tauren asked about Earth, about humanity, about the war. Price answered honestly, sharing both the victories and the terrible cost. "Why did you not surrender?" the Tauren captain asked. "The Drathic offered you a place in their empire, technology, resources." Price considered the question. "Because freedom is not negotiable. We would rather die free than live as subjects." The Tauren captain was silent for a moment. Then it said, "We understand. The Tauren were once conquered. It took us 200 years to regain our independence. Perhaps Earth and Tauren can be friends." Price smiled. "Perhaps we can." The meeting ended with an exchange of data. Star charts, cultural information, trade possibilities. It was a small beginning, but it was a beginning nonetheless. Back on Earth, the United Earth Defense Council convened for its annual session. Representatives from every nation sat together, united by shared trauma and shared purpose. The debates were heated, the disagreements real, but everyone understood they were on the same side now. New defense satellites orbited the planet, armed with weapons reverse-engineered from Drathic technology. Early warning systems monitored approaches from deep space. Military forces trained in combined operations, sharing tactics and technology across old national boundaries. Earth was preparing, not for conquest but for survival, not to attack but to defend. In a classroom in Tokyo, children learned about the invasion, not as abstract history but as living memory. Many of their teachers had fought in the war. Some bore scars, all bore memories. "Why did the aliens attack us?" a child asked. The teacher, a former soldier who had lost an arm fighting in the Amazon, answered carefully. "Because they thought we were weak. They thought technology made them superior. They learned that strength comes from many places, and technology is just one of them." "Will they come back?" "Maybe," the teacher admitted. "Or maybe other aliens will come. That is why we prepare. That is why we learn. That is why we never forget." As the sun set on Earth, casting long shadows across rebuilt cities and new monuments, humanity looked to the stars with different eyes than before, not with wonder alone, but with knowledge. They were not alone in the universe. They were not the most advanced species. But they had proven something important. They had proven that advancement could be measured in many ways, that technology alone did not guarantee victory, that the will to fight, the refusal to surrender, the absolute commitment to freedom could overcome superior firepower. Earth was just another target, until it became the planet that said no, the world that fought back, the species that chose extinction over subjugation. And the message was clear to anyone listening across the vast distances of space. Come in peace, and humanity will welcome you. Come in war, and humanity will teach you the same lesson the Drathic learned. Some prices are too high to pay. Some freedoms are worth any sacrifice. And Earth, scarred and surviving, would never forget that lesson again.